Halloween is a time when many people around the world embrace the paranormal. We tell ghost stories, consume more preservatives than Paul Rudd's skincare treatment, and spend way too much money on costumes that we'll wear once and permanently stain with face paint. It's a macabre and exciting time where we can think about the unknown and wonder if we'll witness a ghost when the veil between the living and dead is at its thinnest. But for people visiting the Red Lion Inn on Halloween night in 1968, the fun and games of All Hallows Eve turned into a real-life horror story. Happy Halloween, I'm Bleaki, and today I will tell you about the chilling haunting of the Red Lion Inn in Avebury, UK. On the night of the incident, things began like any other evening, but as the night drew in, objects began to fly around the room and phantom footsteps stalked customers before the tormented spirit of a murder victim crossed the thin veil of death and crawled out of the pub's ancient well. The Red Lion Inn has stood since the 15th century, with its timber-framed facade, low wooden beams and creaky floorboards. It's exactly the kind of place where you'd expect to encounter a ghost or two. For centuries, the pub has served as a cosy gathering spot for locals, travellers, and as legend has it, a few spirits. And I'm not just talking about the ones that get you hammered. As is often the case with haunted locations, the Red Lion Inn has seen its fair share of tragedy. Events that have bound several spirits within its 400-year-old walls, with one in particular which is truly terrifying. This is the story of Lady Shepherd, or Florrie as she is more commonly known. Florrie's tragic story dates back to the English Civil War when she was viciously murdered by her soldier husband after being caught doing the no pants dance with another man. He stabbed the lover, although some do say he fired a musket at him, before turning to Florrie and slitting her throat in a fit of rage. So the Shepherd household was not a happy one. After the gruesome acts, the bodies were tossed down the well of the building. The same well that still resides in the pub, but covered with glass to make it a table. This is one of those stories where the details have gone on a little murky over the years, as another account claims that it's actually an unknown assailant, possibly a traveller or someone with a vendetta for the family, who was responsible. Since then, her restless spirit is said to roam the inn, unable to move on from the scene of her violent death. Visitors to the inn have reported sightings of Lady Shepherd over the years. Her ghost is typically described as a woman in a flowing dress, a classic woman in white. It's said that she mostly appears in the upper rooms of the inn, though she has been seen in other areas as well, including the staircase and the hallways. While she has only ever been seen as a fleeting image, it was on Halloween night 1968 that her spirit managed to manifest in full force and wreak havoc on the unsuspecting customers. I share ghost stories all the time on my channel, and some of those cases have been really creepy, but there's something about a haunting happening on Halloween night that just hits different for me. Maybe it's the idea that if anything paranormal is going to happen, it'll be then. On that night, a small group of people, locals and a few visitors, gathered at the inn for a Halloween celebration. They weren't ghost hunters or paranormal enthusiasts, but a group of people there to enjoy some drinks and the company of others in a warm old pub. But as the evening wore on, what started as a typical gathering slowly turned into an unforgettable and chilling experience. Drinks flowed, laughter filled the air, and the pub's dim lighting and old world charm made for a cosy atmosphere. For those of you who have never been to a British pub, think the Prancing Pony, where most of the regulars look like Gandalf and the shoplifters selling stolen joints of beef look like Gollum. The night drew on and people were having a merry time, but around midnight, things began to take a strange turn when doors began slamming on their own. At first, the guests thought it might just be a strong draft. After all, the pub is hundreds of years old, and it wouldn't be surprising if the wind had found its way through gaps, especially during autumn in Britain. While people joked, it did strike everyone strange that they weren't just closing softly, but slammed shut with force before opening again, something that had never happened before. It wasn't just one door, however, but several of them throughout the entire pub. As time passed, people began to exchange nervous glances, but it was Halloween after all, so some tried to laugh it off. It's just part of the fun, someone joked. but the atmosphere in the room had undeniably shifted, and some patrons decided it was time to go home out of growing fear. Shortly after, the lights in the pub started to flicker. Of course, it could have been a simple electrical issue, especially with the age of the building. But then, several customers reported seeing shadows moving across the walls, which began to take on more human shapes. The skeptics in the room tried to work out who was casting the ghostly shadows, but everyone else was sitting down while the shadows seemingly walked around the room. While doors slammed, lights flickered, and fleeting shadows moved around the room, everyone began to murmur among each other, wondering if it was really something paranormal. The warmth and laughter that had filled the pub just an hour before had now turned into fear and the feeling of oppression. If that wasn't enough, things were about to become more physical, with several people reporting that objects and glasses were moving, with some being sent crashing to the floor or launched at the wall. It was also said that a chandelier began spinning unnaturally above the head of a bearded customer. Now, this is quite an important detail, as before this moment, the legend of Florrie said that the ghost was most often spotted by men with beards, leading to the theory that the spirit hated people that had the same facial hair as a murderer. Imagine if the pub was filled with a group of hipsters that night. That place would have been a bloodbath. At this point, the group had fallen silent, some intrigued with the paranormal goings on, others terrified that if they moved, they would be targeted by the growing activity. All that could be heard was the swinging of the chandelier and the electric cracks of the flickering lights. But that's when they heard something that chilled them to their core. They could hear heavy, deliberate footsteps walking back and forth in the upstairs area above their heads. One of the guests asked the barmaid who was upstairs, to which the terrified girl replied, No one is up there." The sound of the boots pacing across the floorboards became louder. Several guests even went up to check, thinking perhaps someone had snuck upstairs or that there was a logical explanation for the noise. When they reached the upper floor, they found it completely empty. The footsteps continued as if someone or something was pacing right in front and through them. Understandably, the group were terrified at this point. It was clear that something supernatural was at play. They all gathered back downstairs, trying to make sense of what was happening. While others swiftly left, others remained, curious about this seemingly undeniable proof of the afterlife. But little did they know, the night's most terrifying event was still to come, as Lady Shepherd gave them a Halloween to remember. At around 1 AM, which is within the witching hour, the atmosphere in the pub grew even heavier. The lights flickered one more time, and then, at the corner of their eye, one of the guests saw something that truly terrified her. The figure of a woman climbing out of the well, passing through the glass top like it wasn't there. Before they had time to react, she vanished, but to the horror of others, the ghostly figure appeared again at the top of the staircase, just standing there, watching them. The apparition was described as a full-bodied figure, not a mist or shadow, but a clear image of a woman dressed in what looked like 18th century clothing. Her face was pale and expressionless, and she seemed to float rather than walk. According to those present on that night, the figure of Lady Shepherd slowly began to descend the staircase, her gaze fixed straight ahead, but just as she reached the bottom step, she vanished into thin air. After that, the activity suddenly stopped, and the heavy atmosphere suddenly lifted. The group was left in stunned silence. Some were in disbelief, thinking it must have been a trick of the light or even some kind of elaborate hoax. But as they saw her as a physical person who just vanished, nobody could explain what they had experienced. When later sharing their accounts, one of the witnesses, who was described as a man in his early 30s, said, "I'll never forget it. One minute we were all standing there talking about the strange things that had been happening, and the next thing you know, there she was, clear as day. She wasn't some hazy figure or shadowy presence, she looked like a real person, but then, just as quickly as she appeared, she was gone." Another witness, a woman in her 20s who had come to the inn with friends that night, said, "It was freezing, but it wasn't like a regular cold draft. This was different. It felt heavy, almost suffocating. I could feel it in my bones." A few guests admitted that they didn't actually see the apparition themselves, but they felt the tension in the room shift when others claimed to see her. They had, however, witnessed the rest of the paranormal activity. After the events of that Halloween night in 1968, the story spread like wildfire. The witnesses, still shaken by their experience, told their friends who told others, and soon enough, the haunting became one of the most talked about supernatural events in Wiltshire. The Red Lion Inn, already known for its historical charm, was now firmly cemented as one of the most haunted pubs in Britain. In the years following the Halloween haunting, the Red Lion Inn has attracted the attention of paranormal investigators and ghost hunters, especially on Halloween night. Some were intrigued by the story of Lady Shepherd, while others wanted to see if the eerie events of that night would be repeated. A woman named Janice shared her more recent and strange experience at the Red Lion. She said that she had gone there for some food, armed with a bunch of flowers she planned to give to her sick daughter afterward. She sat at the table directly in front of the well, and as she was waiting for her food to arrive while reading a magazine, she heard a strange rustling sound nearby. To her surprise, she watched as the paper, wrapping the flowers, folded in the middle before being folded back again in the opposite direction. Janice was confused, as the action was too forceful to be some kind of draft. She later mentioned her experience to a worker in a nearby shop, who told her the story of Lady Shepherd. But it's not just the spirit of Florrie who still resides at the Red Lion Inn. But before I get into those stories, why not consider subscribing, hitting the notification bell and giving this video a like. That way you won't miss any future videos, and it will also really help me out. Every now and then, just around midnight, the sound of a ghostly coach with 4 hooves clattering on the cobblestones can be heard right outside the Red Lion Inn. Back in 1893, a local woman named Mrs. Spackman, who was married to a farmer at Beckhampton, often visited her friends, Mr. and Mrs. Neat, the innkeepers. During her evening visits, she claimed to hear the mysterious coach arriving. Excitedly, she'd rush to the door with her friends, hoping to catch a glimpse of the phantom carriage. But after rushing out, they found the road deathly quiet. In 1968, another resident, Mrs. Bath, also reported hearing the same approaching coach, but just like Mrs. Spackman, she never actually saw the carriage or its occupants. While the Red Lion Inn doesn't rent out rooms anymore, it used to be a favourite spot for ghost hunters and thrill seekers looking for spooky ghosts, especially 2 bedrooms known as the Private and the Avenue. Guests often report seeing 2 children playing on the landing outside, and they've also been spotted huddled in a corner of the private room, looking terrified. Also in the private room, 2 more spirits, a man and a woman, have reportedly been seen standing beside the bed, startling those who have woken up to see the faces staring at them before vanishing. A ghostly woman has also been seen sitting at the desk in this room, deep in thought as she stares out the window. Some locals refer to her as Beth, but there's no solid evidence to prove that's her name. Interestingly, even in the summer, guests frequently experience sudden temperature drops in this room. I mean, that doesn't sound too bad. Who doesn't like air conditioning during the summer? And as long as they don't order room service on my card, I'll be able to put up with the ghosts. Before the Red Lion Inn became a beloved pub, it was a farm back in 1802. Legend has it that the farmer who owned the place once hid some outlaws in the cellar. However, things took a dark turn when the gang betrayed and killed him. Customers at the inn claim they've spotted his ghost wandering about, looking quite bloody and brandishing a knife. Imagine if it was just the chef getting the meat ready for the carvery. Talking of phantom catering staff, an eerie waiter has been seen silently standing at tables. When people try and talk to him, he simply vanishes into thin air. Yeah, but if he wanted me to pay the bill, I'm sure he'd hang around. A boy has also been seen within the pub, dashing around at lightning speed. He's been spotted quite frequently, sometimes with a little girl chasing after him. They've even been seen standing in the ladies' toilets. A visitor to the pub, Jez McCann, shared an experience. He said, "2 of my daughters saw a boy and a girl in the female toilets there about 18 or 19 years ago. They were looking right at them as clear as day, then vanished." Another customer, Sasha Lou, said, "I've seen the 2 children, and I felt the straps on my rucksack tugged while I was at the bar. I turned around thinking it was a friend, but there was nobody there." One of the reasons given for all the activity experienced at the Red Lion Inn is because it's incredibly close to the Avebury Stone Circle. Avebury is considered a site of supernatural energy, possibly linked to the ancient use of the stones for rituals or spiritual ceremonies. The connection between the energy of the stone circle and the inn's paranormal activity has led some to believe that the two places are somehow intertwined. Ley lines thought to channel spiritual energy are also said to pass through Avebury, empowering the spirits that still haunt the Red Lion Inn. More than 50 years have passed since the 1968 Halloween haunting, yet the story remains as captivating as ever. For those who witnessed the haunting firsthand, the memories of that night remain vivid. The doors that slam shut, the flickering lights, the phantom footsteps, and the terrifying apparition of Lady Shepherd are etched in their minds. The legacy of that night has also inspired numerous books, articles, and documentaries. It stands out as one of the most famous paranormal events in the UK, not just for the events themselves, but for the way they were witnessed by so many people at once. Multiple accounts of the same apparition and experiences make this haunting particularly compelling to both believers and skeptics alike. Some skeptics, however, dismiss the entire night as an episode of mass hysteria, which is a product of heightened emotions and collective imagination, making the fear contagious. After all, it was Halloween, a night when people are already on edge and probably expecting paranormal experiences. The flickering lights, slamming doors and cold spots could have been chalked up to the quirks of an old building. Even the apparition of Florrie could be explained as a trick of the light or the product of overactive imaginations in a dimly lit, ancient building. Not to mention the fact that this happened at midnight in a pub, and I highly doubt they were all drinking Coca-Cola all night. Of course, there's always the possibility that the entire story was cooked up one Halloween night for fun and blew up bigger than anyone ever thought. Maybe it was the owner of the pub who thought up the story to drum up trade and managed to persuade the customers to go along with the lie. I mean, a bag of scratchings and a few pints can go a long way here in the UK. With that being said, if it was made up, how has nobody shared the truth in all these years? Someone would have let it slip, surely. The fact that the people involved stayed anonymous does make me a little suspicious, but I didn't go to that Halloween party that night, and even if I did, by the time the activity kicked off, I'd have probably been in a questionable kebab shop playing food poison roulette. The Halloween haunting of the Red Lion Inn is more than just a scary ghost story. It's a local legend that has taken on a life of its own. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the events that happened that night have become a part of the fabric of the Red Lion Inn, influencing how people see the pub and how they experience it, especially around the spooky season. If you do visit the pub for a cheeky pint, make sure you keep an eye on the indoor well and the stairs. You never know when Florrie may decide to make her next appearance. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you found this video entertaining, please subscribe, give it a like and leave a comment. It really helps my channel grow. And until next time, I hope you have a fantastic Halloween and sleep well, friends.
A phantom whisper in the dead of night, knocks and scratches where there is no light. Forgotten tales and told long forgotten, tales of lost souls, the tragic and rotten. The truth is bleak, but you know what's inside of you. The truth is bleak.